Hey guys, welcome to Bev's Repair Bench. Today we'll be reviewing the Circuit Specialist PPS 2320A triple output power supply. For the people that normally watch my videos, you'll know that I use this power supply pretty regular. This has become my main power supply that I use, even if I'm only using one channel or all three of them or maybe just two. This is the only power supply that's actually on my bench right now. That was one of the reasons that I actually chose a triple output power supply, is to kind of reduce the amount of equipment that I have. I don't have a really huge space to work with here, and every little bit of consolidation I can do helps. Maybe one day soon I'll do a bench tour. I've had a shop tour actually requested, so I'll try to work both of those in there. But the bench tour is gonna be pretty small. But anyways, I have been using this power supply for a while. I do like it a whole lot. For what I do, I think it's excellent. There are a few little things here and there that I would like to see improve, but overall it is a great power supply, and we'll kind of go into some of the features that I like about it and some of the things I don't like, and just a little bit of usability. Now up front, I am not a fan of doing reviews. I think that opinions are extremely objective. Everybody uses everything for something different, and so what I do, while something may be perfect or lacking, it may be absolutely perfect for what you do, or it may be absolutely horrible for what you do. So I generally try to stay away from reviews that say this is the greatest thing in the world for somebody, or this is the worst thing in the world. I like to look at things on the surface. So we'll go a little bit into specs. We won't go into like noise and things like that, because that kind of stuff isn't honestly useful for me. I just wanted, I need a power supply that has 3 outputs, that can do kind of this range. So we'll go into more of what I use it for, rather than, every little nitpicky thing about it. Another thing that I do have to tell you guys is that I actually contacted Circuit Specialist to try to get this power supply. I really wanted it for free. However, at this point, I don't think that I have that much popularity to warrant those kind of gifts, or whatever you want to call it. However, they did offer me a discount. So the power supply you're looking at today, I did not pay full price for it. Now, with that being said, and having used this power supply, I would, now that I know that it fits what I do, I would have gladly paid I believe it's $180 full price. So before we turn on the power supply and start going through some of the functions and features, I want to kind of tell you about what I use this for. I'm not a professional. If you're a regular watcher of my videos, not only do I say that a lot, but it's very apparent in me actually doing projects. I do this for a hobby. I enjoy it. It's fun. And so that was another reason that I kind of chose this power supply, is because it does what I want it to do, and it was one of the cheaper ones out there. What I do does not warrant, a $400 or $500 power supply that is feature packed and can do all kind of fancy things. This power supply I thought would be a good fit for me, and I think a lot of the people that do watch my videos that are kind of doing the same line of things, I think it will be a good fit for you too. Alright, so like I mentioned, this is a Circuit Specialist branded power supply. Now, it was actually made before by Hantech or Hantech, whatever you want to call it, and it is identical to that. I believe, according to the Circuit Specialist website, it is actually the same manufacturer that builds these. Now, Hantech was known to have a few issues with this power supply. One of the largest ones was that the power supply was actually dead on arrival, or it died soon after. Now, I've been using this power supply for a while. It was definitely not dead on arrival, so I was really thankful for that. and so far it's been serving me well. I did actually go and use my electronic load to test each channel of this power supply. Now I didn't do like an overnight test or anything, but I think it was somewhere in the neighborhood of like 10 minutes on each channel. Right whenever I got it, just to torture test it to see if I could actually break it, and it seems to survive just fine. I haven't had any issues with it other than, and this is not an issue that was the power supply issue, this actually turned out to be a issue with my circuit I was running. If you watched the reversing DC motors with relays video, you'll see that there was actually a small issue in there, but that was due to basically the inductive loading of the relay coils kind of backfeeding into the power supply. So other than that, it's been performing great. And like I said, that was not the power supply's fault. That was a amateur electronics hobbyist's fault. Another side note, while we're kind of talking about circuit specialists and them producing this power supply, I did have a mistake made. Whenever I ordered the power supply, I made sure I ordered the right one and all that, but the wrong power supply did come in. It was the single channel, basically the single channel version of this supply. It looked really good. I kind of wanted to take it out and play with it and maybe even do a little video, but I also didn't want to do that because I knew I had to return it. I'm really not upset about the mistake because, especially for me planning on doing a review of this supply, it's always a good thing to actually have some experience with a company's warranties and returns policy and customer service in general. That customer service was excellent. Quick responses, really trouble-free swapping it out. The only thing that I didn't really like too much about returning this power supply, and it kind of reflects on the situation that it was circuit specialist's mistake, is that you have to return the power supply or return whatever item was incorrect, and when they receive that item is whenever you get shipped your replacement power supply. I understand why that's a thing, why you'd want to do that, but at the same time, I really would like to see something to where as soon as you get shipping confirmation that this is getting shipped back to you, you're shipping me the correct item, because I've already waited a week for this thing to come in, and so now I'm waiting another week for it to get back to you and another week for me to receive my item. So that's basically you turn that into a 3-week order time for me. Not the greatest thing, but once again, I do understand. So, general customer service, excellent. Actual return policies could use a little bit of sharpening up for me. But like I said, I'm actually glad that I experienced that because, it gives a much more in-depth view of how suppliers handle customer service. And I'm sure that Murphy's Law just caught me. I highly doubt that that's a common occurrence. Alright, so let's go ahead and turn this power supply on. That is the first complaint about this power supply, is every time you turn it on, you will get that really big beep. Now to turn off that beep, you long push the channel 3 button until it beeps, and then you've turned the beep off. And I've also locked the keypad, so long press that to turn that off. But however, even if you turn this beep off, if you run a power cycle on the machine, you will get the beep again. We can also hear, let me try to get the mic close so you can hear the fan. So on power up, it does run the fan for a few seconds and you can hear it. But honestly, I think this is a very quiet power supply for having a built-in fan for it. Another good thing is that the fan does not run all the time. It only runs under load whenever it kind of senses some heat building up. So for the most part, when the power supply is not being used and you have it on, it is perfectly silent. Right, so an important thing to note whenever you have this power supply turned on is that your channel 3, which is your fixed voltage outputs, is always going to be live. It's always going to be outputting voltage. So for me, that doesn't affect me at all. It's fine. You know, if I really wanted to, I'd put some kind of maybe inline switch on my hot side or something like that. But honestly, it's not a big deal. It works fine. And to cycle through the voltages provided by the fixed output, you just hit the channel 3 button and you can choose your 2.5, 3.3, or 5 volt. We've already covered the key lock. Now, to turn on the outputs of 1 and 2, you push the output button, and that brings both channels online. Now, I know a lot of people would prefer to have independent channel 1 and channel 2 output buttons, but you know, once again, just like the channel 3 output always being high, this doesn't hurt me at all. As far as using the power supply without reading the instruction manual, I did find it actually pretty simple. It's really, there's only like 2 little things you kind of have to keep in mind. One of those is actually the memory. Now you see there are 4 memory buttons. However, there's actually 8 memory settings, because you can choose channel 1 or channel 2, and then you can go into whichever one you want to adjust, and you can start adjusting simply by turning the encoders. You don't have to go into any kind of adjustment mode or anything like that. You can just turn the encoders to wherever you need. So let's do a 10 volt and 1 amp. And so we hold down the first memory button, and that's going to save that memory. So now we can go to channel 2, and we can turn that to whatever we want, and we can hold down the first memory button again. Okay, so now channel 1, if you're in memory, has 2 settings on it. So I really like it this way. I would much rather have 8 settings rather than 4. You know, 4 on 2 channels. I like the independence of it. That's a big plus for me, because I like being able to just change and tune whatever I need to do. Now, channel 1 and channel 2 can be configured for either serial, parallel, or tracking outputs. And you do that by simply pressing one of these 3 buttons. This is your serial, this is your parallel. You can hear the relays clicking inside, and this is your tracking. I would have maybe preferred that you actually have one button, kind of like your channel 3, how you can cycle through the 3 different settings, that could actually cycle through those 3, or actually 4 settings, because independent. And maybe you could have put these as the output, but I'm also not an electrical engineer. That may be a lot deeper than I would know. So, but not a real game changer. It is kind of nice to be able to go from one straight to the other, but I wouldn't mind having to push 3 buttons if they would have wanted to do it that way. I think it would have been a little bit simpler. Alright, so going a little bit deeper into the encoders for the voltage and current adjustments. You can simply turn the encoder, and it also is kind of a velocity aware kind of thing. The faster you turn it, it will actually jump digits, and if you turn it slowly, it'll kind of stay on that least significant digit. This is not my preferred way to adjust it, simply because I'm a little clumsy, and so it's really a little bit fidgety for me to, you know, really fine-tune this way, because I'm so uncoordinated that it's pretty easy for me to just slip, and all of a sudden it's it's turning the digit above the one that I want to turn. But they do have a better way, at least for me. If you push the encoder You can cycle through whatever digit you want to adjust. Now there's no enter button on here to say I'm done adjusting. Once you've adjusted, you have to wait a second or two and it'll quit blinking and it'll set it. So don't think that you can just adjust and hit a button and be done. I don't even think you can do that if you push the output. Oh, well, you could push the output, so if you really want to do that, then that's you. But I do prefer to pick the digit that I'm adjusting. Alright, so let's talk a little bit about the specifications on this power supply. Channels 1 and 2 are 0 to 32 volt output and up to 3.1 amps, although really I would just call it 3 amps. I wouldn't really count that 0.1. And if you put them in parallel, I believe it is actually kind of limited to 5 amps. If we go to parallel mode, it does say 6.2, so. But I also wouldn't recommend running a power supply at max capacity constantly. For channel 3, you're going to have 2.5, 3.3, or 5 volt outputs. And all of those will be a 3 amp max. And one side note, whenever you take this power supply out of the box, the memories are automatically set at the highest outputs. So you have to be kind of cautious with that. You may want to go right in and actually turn those down, because if you're like me and you accidentally hit that memory button with your output on, it will switch and it will burn up whatever it was you were working on if it can't handle that voltage and current. While we're talking about taking the power supply out of the box, let's talk a little bit about what's in the box. You do get a IEC power cord. You also get a USB cord that can connect the power supply to your computer for PC control. You get a CD with the PC interface drivers on it. You get the operation guide, which I have yet to read. And you also get a little circuit specialist brochure kind of talking about what they have. And of course, the power supply. Now originally I thought that the PC interface for this power supply was going to be a lot more useful to me than I actually use it. I have fooled around with it. It is a really great PC interface. But my plan was to actually have this thing stuck somewhere up on a shelf and just have multicolored leads coming down and then actually control it from my computer because of the, once again, the limited space on my bench. But it turned out that it fits so perfectly right here that I just leave it there. So I don't use the PC interface often, in fact ever, other than just initially setting it up and trying it out. But it is very usable, and it is a really, I find, a really good piece of software, easy to understand, easy to use, and very effective. You also get these little connectors. It's just kind of mini alligator clips. You get 6 of them. They're about, I don't know, 8-10 inches long, and they have the fork terminal on the end, so you can loosen up your banana jack and screw it down and hook it up. I don't really use these. I prefer the ones that I have where you just plug them in, but they do give you something to connect it, and they're pretty hefty wires, so no doubt they'll be able to handle the outputs of the power supply. So like I said, you get 6 of them, so you can actually use the power supply just like it is out of the box. On the subject of the outputs and the banana jacks, I do really like the way they have the banana jack set up. Not only can you plug a 4mm jack into it, or you can use spade terminals or wrap a wire around it, but they also have the little holes in it, so you can use, I'm just going to use a resistor in this case, but you can drop your wire in there and tighten it down and make a really simple, quick little connection. So good job on that. You also have a earth ground reference if you need it. It did not come with a connector bar like most of them normally do to actually permanently connect it to the internal ground of the power supply, but that's not a big deal to me. I've more often than not, I leave my outputs floating. So, and if I do need a ground, I can always just cut a little piece of jumper wire and stick in there. So I really like the output jacks on here. They're also color coded just black, red, and green for ground. As far as the display goes, this was another big sell for me, is that I really like having my current adjustment go down to the milliamps. I don't need it to go further, but I do want it to go at least to the milliamps, and this one does that. For voltages, you know, you only go down 2 decimals, but at that same time, if you really need a accurate reading on your voltage, you can just use a multimeter. That is a little bit of a complaint with this power supply, is that it is not super accurate on the displays. But if I really need that accuracy, I will grab a multimeter. The main thing that I want is the milliamp resolution for the adjustment, and it does that perfectly well for me. You also have in the middle here, this will indicate your channel 1 and channel 2, and I find this is pretty common with triple output power supplies and a little bit unintuitive, is that channel 1 is to the right and channel 2 is to the left, and your outputs are set up the same. So this is channel 1 and this is channel 2. It's not a big deal to get used to, but it would be nicer if it was flipped around. Alright, let's talk a little bit about the form factor of the power supply. It is a pretty large power supply. It's about 13 inches deep and 8 inches wide by about 5.5 inches tall. But it is a linear power supply. So my preference is actually linear power supplies because they do deliver a kind of lower noise threshold, which honestly I probably don't even need that for what I do. I mostly just need kind of a raw power to send the stuff, and noise isn't really an issue for me. But I do like linear power supplies. That being said, they do come in a larger form, and it's heavy. It comes with a little carrying handle for what good that does me. Also, these bumpers, which they're actually pretty easy to remove, but I like them. They're a nice little touch. So, what are my final thoughts on the PPS 2320A? Well, the name is a little bit long for me, but other than that, this is an awesome power supply. It works really well. I like the size of it. You know, it is a little large, but it is a triple output power supply. So having this versus having 3 power supplies on my bench, it fits the bill perfectly for what I do. I think if you're an electronics hobbyist, definitely not professional. I don't think it has the features that a professional would really like to have on here. But if you're going into just a little bit more advanced stuff, you know, then maybe just, I don't know, playing around with an Arduino, or actually, even if you're using an Arduino and you're building circuits that require multiple supplies, where you're working with relays and things like that, you know, just above beginner, you know, maybe I don't think I would choose this as my first power supply I ever buy, but it's a really good power supply for what I do. So once again, I would like to thank Circuit Specialists for sending this to me at a discounted price. I did pay for it, guys, so judge me how you will, but in all honesty, this really is a great power supply. So thanks for watching. Also, if you want to see this power supply get used, subscribe to my channel. I have a few videos where I've already used it, and in a future video I will actually be using it on my Tektronix 465B oscilloscope to repair the multimeter that is piggybacked to it. That multimeter does need a triple output power supply with a 5-volt rail and positive and negative 12 volts. So this thing is going to fit the bill perfectly for that. So stay tuned for that video, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. And thanks for watching, guys.